If you don't want to worry about application tracking systems and ensure that you get an interview, be sure to check out the Paper Moon link in the description and use the promo code STACKER to get 20% off of their resume template kit. Welcome to another Micro Interactions video. Today we're going to build an input that has a character limit and will display the number of characters that are left. Now I got inspiration for this from the Programming Expert, and he has great stuff on Instagram and YouTube. Links are in the description. Now I am going to put my own spin on it, and that's what you should always do. When you find something that you want to build, copy it and get an understanding of it, but then change something. Make it your own, put your own spin on it. That's how you learn. And of course, when you get inspiration from someone, you should always give credit where it's due. Now, if this video helps you out, help me out by liking and subscribing. Let's get into it. All right, so I've got 3 files here, an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript file. And then I have this running on live server in my browser. So let's start out with the HTML. We'll just add a boilerplate here, and we'll name this input character count limit. All right, and then in the body, we're going to start out with a label, and this will have the class of field, and then we'll have an input with the class of field input, and it's going to be a type of text. And then let's add a placeholder. The placeholder will be title. And we'll also add a max length, and we'll set that to 20. All right, and then after that, within the label still, we're going to have a span, and that is going to be for our field counter. There we go. We'll also add our link to our style sheet. So that is a link. There we go. And then just before the body, let's add our JavaScript. So that will be a script, and we called that main.js. Okay, so that should be all of the HTML. Okay, so now we just have an unstyled input here. So now let's work on the CSS. First thing that I'm going to do here is just paste in some Google fonts. We're going to use Open Sans. And then in the HTML and body, we're going to add a height of 100%. And then just in the body, we're going to set the margin to 0. Background is going to be almost black. And then we're going to set it to display as flex. We'll align the items to center and justify the content to center. And that is just for demonstration purposes so that we can center everything within the web page. Then we'll set our font family to Open Sans with a fallback of sans serif. All right, and then after that, let's style our field. Okay, so then the field, we're going to set the position on this to relative, and that's so that we can absolutely position all of the content within it. Then after that, we'll look at the field counter. We're going to position this absolute, and then set the right to 0, top to 50%, and then translate Y. We're going to set that to -50%. So that's going to horizontally position the counter all the way to the right, and then vertically position it right in the middle. And we'll see that once we finish our styles here. So let's set a width. We're going to set that to 1.6 rem, and then a height of 1.6 rem. And then we're going to display this as flex, align items, center, and justify content, center. That's going to place the number that we're going to put into the counter in the center of that square. So now let's set the font size. We'll set that to 0.8 rem, slightly smaller than normal. We're going to set a color on the font to an off-white. And then we'll set the background to an RGBA value with 0.2 opacity. And then a border radius, we'll set that to 0.2 rem, give it a slight border. Let's move on to styling the field input. So we'll say field input. We're going to get rid of the default border and outline. So we'll say border is going to be none, and then outline is going to be none. We're going to set the font family to inherit because by default, inputs don't inherit their font family from the body. We're going to set the font size to 1.4 rem, slightly larger than normal. Padding, we're going to set to 0.8 rem on the top, 2 rem on the right, and that's going to give it some space for that counter, and then 0.8 rem on the bottom and 0 on the left. All right, after the padding, we're going to set a minimum width of 16 rem, and this is just for demonstration purposes. Give it some size there, and then background, we're going to set to none, get rid of the default background. Color is going to be the off-white that we used earlier, and we're going to give it a border on the bottom. Now we initially at the top here, we said border none. Now we're going to override that by adding a border just to the bottom. So border bottom is going to be 0.15 rem solid, and then an RGBA value. It's going to be the same value, but we're going to change the opacity to 0.4. All right, let's save that. All right, so now we can see basically what we have here. So let's move on to our placeholder. So the field input placeholder, and we're just going to set the color on this to our RGBA value of the 0.4 opacity. And now let's put a little bit of animation into this. So when I click on this, I want the bottom border to change colors and animate in. So what we're going to do is we're going to target the field and a pseudo element of after. We'll have to set our content to blank. We're going to position this absolute. We're going to set it left at 0, right at 0, bottom at 0, and we're going to set a height of 0.15 rem, the same size as our border bottom. We're going to give it a background of an orange color. So let's save that. So now we have this orange border on the bottom, but I want this to animate in. So initially, we're going to set a transform translate X. So this horizontally, we're going to move it -100%. Now you can see that it's off of the page on the left over here. We're also going to set a transition so that we have a smooth animation. We're going to set the transition on the transform of 0.3 seconds, and we're going to give it an ease out. Okay, so now we want to make this transition happen. So the way that we do that is here we're going to target our field, and then on hover, we're going to target the after pseudo element. We also want field on focus, the after pseudo element, and one more, our field focus within, and then our after pseudo element. So on 3 different things, if we hover, if we focus, or if we have focus within, which is the input that is within it, then this animation is going to occur. All right, so the animation is very simple. It's just going to be a transform, and then translate X and set it back to 0 where it should be. All right, let's save that. So now as we hover, we'll see that it comes in. And if we focus, it stays there. And if we tab away, we'll see that it goes back. Now, of course, we don't want this to be visible like it is right now. So the way that we'll do that is we go up to our field, and we're going to add an overflow hidden. Save that, and now you can't see it. Once we hover or focus, then it's there. And when we click away, it goes away. All right, so now let's work on the JavaScript that adds our numbers into our counter. The first thing that we'll do is get our elements that we need. So we need our input. So that's going to equal document.querySelector. And then we need to get our input and the field input. And then the other thing that we need is our counter. So that is going to equal document.querySelector. And that is our span and our field counter. Okay, so now we need to get the maximum length. So if we go back to our HTML, we set this maximum length to 20. We can get this property in JavaScript. So that is on our input. So we're going to say const max length is going to equal our input and then get attribute. We're going to get the max length attribute. Then we're going to add that to our counter. So we'll say counter.inner text is going to equal max length. Let's save that. And so now we have 20. So we're always going to start with the max length at 20. Now, once we start typing, we want this to update. So in order to do that, we need to add an event listener. So we'll say input.add event listener, and we need to listen for an input event. So we'll get our event, and then we'll have an arrow function. So now we can do something with this. So first we need to get our value length. So that's going to equal our event.target.value.length. So as we type in here, it's going to basically get our value, what we've typed, and it's going to count how many characters. That's the dot length. So now that we know how many characters we've typed, we need to figure out how many characters are left. So that is going to be, we'll create a const of characters left length. All right, so that is going to equal our max length minus our value length. So now we need to do a little bit of a test. We need to make sure that we have an actual number here. So we're going to say if characters left is less than 0, then just return. So don't do anything. And if that is not true, then we're going to say counter.inner text is going to equal the characters that are left. So now if we start typing in here, of course, I need to spell things correctly. Length, how about that? Let's save that and try this again. Now if we start typing, there we go. And so it's telling us how many characters are left. So that's going to be it for this video. If this video helped you out, help me out by liking and subscribing for more videos like this.